Chapter 3: 8 Cities and the Outback. In each of Australia's 6 states, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia and Tasmania, there is a large city which is near a river and near the sea. More than half of all Australians live in these 6 cities, and many others live near to them. In fact, most people live only a few kilometers from the sea. Sydney, in New South Wales, is the oldest and the biggest city, with 4.2 million people. It is built around an enormous harbor. Some say that it is the biggest natural harbor in the world. It is a busy modern city, and its tall buildings are the center for a lot of Australian business. It is also an international city where you can eat food from all over the world or just visit some of the 30 wonderful beaches. When they think of Sydney, many people think of the Sydney Opera House. The roof of this beautiful building looks like sails on Sydney Harbour. It was opened in 1973 for music, theatre and dance. Near the Opera House is one of the longest bridges in the world, Sydney Harbour Bridge. Melbourne, in the state of Victoria, is the second biggest city with 3.7 million people, and it was the capital of Australia from 1901 to 1927. In the 1880s, people built many line buildings in this rich city, and many of them are still there today. It has wide streets, some lovely old buildings, and many large parks and gardens. Like Sydney, it is home to many immigrants, and it has a large Chinatown. Melbourne's theatres and pubs are famous, and it is a popular center for art, music and festivals of many kinds. Brisbane is in Queensland, on the east coast. Here, the temperature can get very hot, and you can still find steel houses, wooden houses on tall posts, which let cool air under the house. Brisbane is an important center for business, and many tourists also come to visit the city on their way to the beaches of Queensland or the Great Barrier Reef. Adelaide, in South Australia, is called the City of Churches, and it is also famous for its city plan, which put parks all around the city center. It has famous festivals of music, theatre and film, and the Womadelaide Festival of World Music and Dance. From Adelaide, many visitors travel to Barossa Valley, where German immigrants began making wine in the 19th century. Some of Australia's best wine comes from here today. Perth is a long way from the other cities in Western Australia by the Indian Ocean. The land in the west has plenty of gold, oil and valuable minerals, so Perth is a rich city. About 1/3 of the families in Perth own a boat, and swimming and sailing are a part of life for nearly everybody. Hobart in Tasmania is a smaller, quieter city with a busy harbour from which boats sail to French and Australian scientific stations in Antarctica. The city began in 1803 with 433 people, 280 of them convicts. Now it has a population about 180,000 people. Visitors to Hobart often go on to see Port Arthur, where the first convicts lived. Finally, there are 2 more cities, Darwin and Canberra, that are in territories, not states. The Australian government has more power over what happens in the territories than in the states. Darwin, in the Northern Territory, has no tall buildings, only long, low ones, because during the summer storms the winds are sometimes very strong. In 1974, a storm called Cyclone Tracy killed 67 people and destroyed nearly all the buildings in Darwin. Many Aborigines and immigrants from Asia live in the city, and there is a big army base here as well. Canberra is in the Australian Capital Territory. Like many countries, for example Brazil and the United States, Australia has a special part of the country which is just for its capital city. Canberra is the newest of the Australian cities, and its name is an Aboriginal word meaning meeting place. It is also different from the other cities because it is a long way, 120 kilometers from the sea, although it is on a river, the Molonglo. It was designed by the American Walter Burley Griffin in 1912 and became the capital of Australia in 1927. This beautiful city has thousands of trees and a big lake in its center. Canberra is the home of many important national buildings like Parliament House. The Australian government meets here, and many of the people in Canberra work for the government. If you leave the cities and go to the hot center of Australia, you will find yourself in the outback. The outback is more than 2/3 of Australia, but its population is less than 100,000. Many people live on sheep or cattle stations, which are enormous farms. There are a few cattle stations in Australia, which are each as large as the country of England. The nearest neighbor is perhaps 100 kilometers away. The nearest city 1,500 kilometers away. People travel by road or by air. On the roads, you can often see road trains carrying cattle from the cattle stations. Small aeroplanes are used to take people, food, post, and machines to places that are far away from the towns. Airplanes are also necessary for the flying doctors. At special times each day, people in the outback can speak to a doctor by radio and get help. Each station or house keeps a box of medicine so that the doctor can say, for example, take 2 of medicine number 6. If things are more serious, a plane will bring a sick person to hospital or take a doctor to see them. Planes in the flying doctor service fly about 45,000 kilometers every day. Children in the outback use the schools of the air. When these began, teachers spoke to the children by radio and sent them their work by post. Now they use the internet to stay in touch with each other and with their teachers. Once a year, all the children spend a week together. The younger children go to Alice Springs, and the older children go to a big city like Sydney or Adelaide. This gives them the chance to spend time with children of their own age. Alice Springs is the largest outback town with a population of 26,500 people. For about 100 years, it was just a small group of houses and shops, but recently the population has grown because it has become an important tourist center. You can travel here by train from Adelaide or Darwin, and many tourists come to Alice Springs on their way to Uluru, the great rock in the desert. The first white people who came to the outback used camels to carry themselves and their luggage. Now there are wild camels living in the desert, and there are farms with camels for tourists who want to try a journey by camel into the outback. With radio, television, the internet and airplanes, people in the outback feel less lonely than they used to. But the outback is still a hard place to live. From time to time, tourists die when they drive into the outback without enough water to drink.